Justice League, I think of Wonder Woman, Superman, Green Lantern, Batman. You don't want to mess with that lot. But you, Barry, you're just the team mascot, aren't you, mate? The comic relief. The speedy flaming larrikin. Yeah, he's the loser of the league, folks. The fastest man alive, according to all these girlfriends. It's the Flash. Sorry.
Hey, Metropolis! Do you like live executions? Well, don't touch that dial, or I'll break your fingers.
You know, sometimes life is very hard and difficult. There are trials and difficulties that we go through every day. Even sometimes just getting out of bed to start your day can be difficult and draining. You know, especially if it's to do something that truly disheartens you. A job you hate, a failed business you have to work at, you know, maybe even going to the gym when you're in the beginning stages of working out. It isn't easy. And truth is, no one gets out of this life alive. But there is a point and a purpose to it all. There is an inherent beauty and point in the grand scheme of it all. Even in the littlest of atom, there is a reason for it, even if we have to find it ourselves. I say this because life can be brilliant just by looking at things from a different perspective. Just by looking at things differently, your mood can change. I always tend to try to look on the bright side of things and tend to give people, movies, and especially video games, the benefit of the doubt when it comes to enjoyment. I thought this way until I recently purchased and played Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I thought life and anything you look at it, when it comes to life, could be spun positively. I mean, even the worst games, the worst movies, the worst of many things can be looked at from a positive way. You know, I watched The Room and think to myself, this movie's so terrible and bad that it's good. This game is one of the few times in my life where I cannot truly say anything positive that could redeem the product in any way. We're looking at the abomination that is the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And full disclosure, this will be objectively a review that I will not enjoy. I'm a huge fan of the Batman Arkham games, and to see this game made frustrates me very much. So I will say this is a completely biased retro review and will not make any apologies or pull any punches. Released in February of 2024, it was the long-awaited continuation of the Batman Arkham franchise, the last mainline game being Batman Arkham Knight, released in 2015. Largely taking place about 5 years after Arkham Knight, Brainiac is attacking the world and the Justice League has been incapacitated, and it's up to the Suicide Squad to save the world. Now, from my understanding, development for this game started pretty much, I believe, right after Arkham Knight. There were rumors about a Suicide Squad game being made by WB Montreal, who did the Batman Arkham Origins game and the Batgirl DLC for Knight, and I think their game, Gotham Knights, that was recently released in 2022. But ultimately, they were working on this game instead, with about a little more than 24 writers and years of work to be able to put this game out. Now, the game was revealed pretty early. The first trailer promoted plenty of worry as people saw what the game looked like and what it was going to be, including myself, and thought, crap, what is happening? It was very jarring and a very strange direction, but ultimately many, including myself, were hopeful. Even when the gameplay trailers showed how traversal would be implemented and the use of guns in the game, I was still optimistic and hopeful. You know, I mean, this was the same studio that brought me some of the truly greatest video game experiences of my life. Then, once it was released, the game was universally panned by critics and fans alike. First initially, and literally unplayable when the game was released for early access, and they had to fix the servers for the game because it was actually completing people's games and playthroughs for them. But then quickly, once everyone was able to play it, they saw the game for what it is, which to me roughly boils down to 4 things, more or less. First, I think, was an attempt to distance the Batman character that, more or less, made them famous as a video game studio to see if they could survive without doing just Batman games primarily. Second was to try their hand at a different style of gameplay, although I think more akin to Fortnite really than anything else, and to really capitalize on that market. Third, which is greed to me, is also I think the worst reason, because they changed many aspects of what made them famous to begin with by adapting and making a game that is trying to appeal to a specific target demographic. Fourth, and probably, actually I take that back, the worst reason in my opinion, is because the team of writers in particular are full of narcissists and entitled people that want to write their versions of stories to fit what they call a modern perspective, or probably something closer to a socially acceptable view. There are more reasons, but those are basically just the broader things that I'll get to, as this game broke me in a way that I didn't think was humanly possible. But let's get to the story first. The story is written by really a lot of different people, in fairness, which is never a good sign. This game takes place 5 years after Arkham Knight. For those who don't remember, Batman's identity is revealed, and he effectively goes on the run, attempting to leave Batman for good. But Batman is found, and later joins the Justice League, along with Superman, Green Lantern, the Jon Stewart version, The Flash, and Wonder Woman, where they fight crime and justice until Brainiac comes and attacks Earth, taking control of half of the Justice League by the time the game starts. Amanda Waller, probably the single most annoying person in this game by a league mile, decides to implement her failsafe plan to save the world, which is a Suicide Squad, consisting of Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and King Shark, and others with, DLC and whatnot, by threatening them with death, or to go to Metropolis and save the world. The game starts with a tutorial that lasts for at least half an hour, attempting to explain the game's mechanics on another Earth, which, mind you, are very simple game mechanics, which I don't think it needs more than half an hour, to be brutally honest. I mean, it's fine if unexciting and not the best way to start a game, especially considering Rocksteady's history with their openings to their games being usually jaw-dropping or mesmerizing or specifically memorable. I still remember getting captured and thrown into Arkham City. I still remember taking Joker into Arkham Asylum. Hell, even Arkham Knight, where they just throw you into this large, expansive city and you're just in awe in all of the beauty, which, mind you, was an Unreal Engine 3. I mean, it's an okay start, which then unfortunately only goes downhill from there. From there, they recreate the opening of Arkham Asylum, where Batman takes the Joker, only this time Amanda Waller, along with her men, arrive to take a select few convicts on a mission to save the world. This doesn't help the game from that get-go, where they reference and call back to the game that started it all in terms of my enjoyment of this game. There they meet the woman herself, that being Harley Quinn, Deadshot, who's black now, cool, good job developers, King Shark, and Captain Boomerang. Here, Waller, she goads them into participating in a mission, the mission being basically kill the Justice League and stop Brainiac, telling them she really only needs one of them, while explaining that she has a microchip bomb injector in which she baits them into ejecting each other in the most jarring way possible.
If you want trouble, you got it. You say that you've been thinking, I just thought it. Oh, if you're looking, you know where I'll be. It's the last place that you might have seen me.
I honestly can't tell if they were trying to be funny or not, because it's the most basic, and for this median, the strangest form of comedy to be doing. I mean, it's bordering on slapstick, saying random things or quips to, other players that seem really lazy. It can be funny, but it's just absolutely and bizarrely staged, and it's just not funny or entertaining, at least to me. The characters just from the get-go, they seem like just purely unlikable characters, with the only ones even remotely being likable were King Shark and Deadshot, if any of them. I like Harley Quinn, but solo and on her own, I don't think she stands up as her own character personally. She doesn't always have to be tied at the hip to the Joker by any means, but a big part of her character involves the Joker and the destructive nature she has with him. By herself, she's just crazy and the appeal really isn't there. There's no real complexity unless she's trying to find herself post-Joker, but it's not expressed well in this story at all. I mean, honestly, Boomerang himself is just not likable. He is arrogant, but he's just purely antagonistic just to be antagonistic. Deadshot is fine, he's okay in terms of his character, but outside of his daughter that he's trying to get back to, he's just a normal dude with no real personality. I'm thinking they tried to do, Will Smith's version of Deadshot, but without the personality of Will Smith. To just garbage results. I like King Shark, though, and they play his version, as honestly and very straightforward throughout the story. A literal fish out of water story as he goes to basically a new society and mingling with humans as he gets accustomed to a very different culture. That's great, even if redundant with other media showing, different variations of this, but this story needed more of this in terms of the overall narrative. If you're gonna do funny, do bold things and actually create fun situations and scenarios that lead to, funny moments. Instead, we have unlikable and unrelatable characters all mashed together to try and save the world, which, again, not a great start. Once they are injected, they are then transported to Metropolis via the underground and directly underneath Justice League headquarters. It's a really cool sight to see these holograms of the Justice League members and being in the Hall of Justice. Once they explore a bit and gather equipment for their mission, they exit the Hall of Justice and immediately into Brainiac tentacles and the destruction of Metropolis brought on by Brainiac. I'll say this is a cool sight and one that brought some optimism for me because honestly, it looks great from afar and was the first time I was actually impressed with the game. We then go into our first combat sequence as a team where we can see how the gameplay works in the main game, as a team. Now, I knew this game was going to be a shooter instead of the normal Batman mechanics and gameplay that we're all accustomed to. That being said, the shooting in this game is fine. It's just average. I enjoy shooters and combat, can be fun and not repetitive. There are reasons why people still play Call of Duty, I'm a big Ghost Recon fan myself and, all those shooters. I love all those games. There's a reason why people still play the remastered versions of Call of Duty too, still. Yeah, this isn't that game. I've never played Fortnite, but I assume that gameplay resembles this, and I gotta say, I don't understand the appeal. At least Fortnite has, other mechanics and things that will make it interesting, but without those mechanics, it's just the general shooting and some hand-to-hand combat mixed in, and it's just not fun. This gets incredibly repetitive, boring, and almost too easy in many situations, as I'll explain later. After the first combat sequence, we are then rudely captured by the Green Lantern, the Jon Stewart version. Also, side note, with movies and games being, race-swapping characters, specifically black race-swapping characters left and right, this is one of the few I would have actually been okay with and preferred, especially growing up with the Justice League animated series during the early 2000s. Jon Stewart, in my view, has earned his place to be a part of this league. Whether it's the Kyle Rayner or Hal Jordan version, all three deserve, their credibility, and I would have been fine with any one of them. But from there, we explore parts of Metropolis as Lantern's prisoner, showing us how they invaded and the process to turn captured citizens into transform alien opposition. We are about to be part of Brainiac's crew until the Flash, the Barry Allen version, intervenes and saves us, fighting Lantern so we can make our escape. Convenient that the Flash arrives, otherwise while her plans just fail immediately. Just making a mental note here that, this is just a convenience note. Let's briefly talk about the Justice League now. First, and for much of the game, it's not really explained how Brainiac even captured and brainwashed the League, let alone that Wonder Woman and the Flash are the only ones not under mind control. I gotta say, Batman of all people to be mind controlled after 4 games, including Arkham Origins, he wouldn't have figured out or thought of a way to not be brainwashed, especially after joining the League and finding out, aliens exist. That really bothers me. Anyways, From there, we have the freedom to explore a bit and change characters. Changing characters is easy and simple, and the characters at least have differences in how they travel and certain weapon preferences that they can keep, different enough to at least be playable. Although, and this is specifically for me, and for traversaling, you tend to like certain characters more than others immediately, with no real reason to change to any other character, to be honest. Personally, for me, at least with most of my playthrough, I tended to like Deadshot and, King Shark, mainly because for them, either of them had either better attacks or just traveling was way easier. Now, we'll give this game some props. This game at least looks good. Graphically runs exceptionally well, especially for a launch title once it is playable. Graphically, it looks good and, it runs exceptionally well. That being said, character models and environments immediately up close are a mixed bag. Metropolis has this 1950s future aesthetic look to it, which is good, but the more I looked, the more I either didn't care about the environments because they all started looking generic or just didn't look good and made no sense, if I'm gonna be honest. I mean, if our road system looked anything like Metropolis, then we would just have never-ending traffic with at least a 20-car trauma pretty much every single day. At least in Arkham Knight, while a little outlandish, they made some sense and only added it to making sense when you're actually using the Batmobile and driving these roads. Characters up close look fine, if a little more generic. I really only say this because this game had a long time to be made, and we already saw previous incarnations of Harley Quinn, for instance, and she somehow, or at least to me, looks far less detailed than the previous versions of the Arkham games that we've seen. Well, anyways, we go and attempt to find the Flash by tracking him, where we see him and the Green Lantern going at it. For those who don't know, the Flash and Green Lantern have a very long history of friendship in the comics, regardless of the specific character under the mask, whether it's Wally West, Barry Allen, Jon Stewart, Hal Jordan. So for me, it really should have been a really big and kind of moment for me. But, and I think it largely does okay, but, not as great as I was hoping, but still a bit of a highlight for me.
You got the wrong idea about Brainiac. Come back to the Skull Ship.
I don't know, man. Skull Ship? Sounds pretty evil villain to me.
Now, once we've helped and secure the Flash after he loses the battle to Green Lantern, we hide out at the nearby Batman Museum, where Captain Boomerang accidentally cuts off the finger of the Flash in what I think is supposed to be a funny moment, but comes off very strange, a little weird. And I think it was here that I really started to see the game for what it was, and why I see people seeing this AAA game just poops on male superhero characters. And I think that reason is because I think certain people see this as funny, seeing, an iconic male character lose a finger and being denigrated as a nobody, And I think it's just for really mean-spirited purposes. I think most people won't see this as funny, and many, including myself, see this as stupid and just completely unnecessary. The signs, which I'll explain more of, they really start here, I think, above all else. From this point, hiding out, we are then surprised by, guess who? Batman in the Batman Museum, where we attempt to hunt him down while trying to avoid him with each character as he predator strikes all of us. Not kill us, even though he could just straight up kill us, especially since he just literally killed the guy in his introductory scene, but does knock us all out and we lose the 9-fingered Flash. Look, regardless of what happens to Batman, at least to start, he is done well. He is actually kind of scary, brutal and violent in a very real way that shows how powerful and intimidating he can be. This is also another highlight, and if the game had just had more of these fun parts, fighting, heroes or villains that really actually pertain to the overall story, this game would actually be far better than it is. We then, we change outfits, we then get to free roam Metropolis, we see the city fully and can explore where we see little Easter eggs, whether it's Riddler trophies or Lois Lane broadcasting in the city for some reason, whatever. It's not really explained well. Outside of small things and the eventual side missions, overall there is not a lot to do in this city. We can explore, we can fight enemies, and get crates and unlockables, but generally that's about it. It's dull and boring. The worst things to say about a game, and to me the worst things you can say about any game, is that it's boring. We then make our way back to the Hall of Justice, where we are basically to meet up with Amanda Waller to set up the Hall of Justice as an HQ or a base of operations. It is here we meet Wonder Woman, who is immediately distrusting of the squad and sees them as incompetent and just this incapable group that really can't help in any way. Deservedly so. I can't disagree with that. Here, we get to meet some of the crew who will be assisting us on this impossible and just literally implausible mission of killing the Justice League. One of these people is Hack, who comes in some almost digital spiritual form that will help you level up in a very basic bare bones leveling up system that, just from my playthrough, I just don't think it's very good. But let's just talk about it right now. Most of the upgrades don't really assist or are good enough in general gameplay that make me want to use them, and that is for two reasons. The first is generally the game is easy and its gameplay, and it's easy in its gameplay and it's just general difficulty. It's just a basic game of running and gunning. If you're bad, you're more than good enough to get through most of these missions, which is what I did. Secondly, the upgrades generally I don't think are very good. Well, some of them are good, but for most of them, they're not. It's divided into, I think, just 3 parts that are supposed to pertain to your gameplay. First, if you're a guy who prefers guns, you can upgrade that gun skill tree that'll focus on guns. Same with combats, etc., etc. Some skills will help you and can add to your game. Harley has a skill on her skill tree that I think it's called Leave a Mark that can add a bleeding effect on your enemy. Can is the optimum word, by the way. Most skills are just ways to increase damage output, which ultimately will help, but doesn't diversify gameplay or make things very interesting that makes you want to change the way you play and adapt overall as the game progresses. And I point this out because in previous Batman games, they had a very basic but pretty good leveling up system. You eventually gain both equipment that was pertinent to the main story and skills that diversify your ability to Predator strike people and general combat. As the games got more difficult with the missions and goals, your skills became more diverse. They actually added to your gameplay. But here in Suicide Squad, doesn't have that here. And getting to the point why this leveling up system is very subpar, it's kind of twofold. One that I alluded to earlier is that the gameplay is just boring and repetitive. One can only shoot and fight the same type of enemies over and over and over and over again in a cool but eventually boring landscape can be entertaining just for, a small amount of time. It won't pique your interest the entirety of the game. It's the same controls, killing the same people, and ultimately it's something that's just not that difficult. I mean, I'm a garbage gamer and didn't have a lot of difficulty with most of the missions in this game. There's nothing to set this game apart from other far better shooters other than just certain extra combat capabilities and the comic book and brand that is backing it up. I mean, if this is your cup of tea, then bully for you and enjoy the game, but I believe just for most people, they'd rather spend $70+ to play a far better and more polished and fun experience. And you combine that with the fact that in order to get the better skills, you have to play and specifically grind in this game for hours on end, it ultimately just becomes just not worth it to put in the effort to do so. The other people that help and participate in upgrading equipment, by the way, are a reincarnated version of Poison Ivy, who is now a kid, which honestly is just a weird choice. But anyways, she assists in giving you these things called afflictions, which aid in your weapons like an ice power, or freezing enemies, or poisoning them, and so on and so on. The Penguin gives you guns and upgrades for them, and the Toyman with aiding in your gun's weapon effectiveness. Now, once you recruit all of these side characters during their side missions, they all appear at the Hall of Justice to help upgrade your equipment, etc., etc. But now is where we really need to talk about some story aspects that have bothered me at this point in the game. Here is where you start to realize everyone, not just the playable characters, but almost everyone, doesn't seem very real. Now, let me explain. What I mean by that is that everyone is a character that doesn't make any sense in this game, based off of the situation and the attitudes that they would normally portray for anyone in these situations. What I mean is that even in fiction, in comic book fiction even, there has to be some believability for people's actions unless otherwise specified. Let me give you an example. We know Deadpool's wacky because he breaks the fourth wall and he's this crazy person, but it's established he's a character that breaks these rules and breaks the fourth wall. Even in this universe that is already established, the Arkham universe, the characters, no matter how strange or crazy their reasoning is, they at least make sense in the context of the story and median that they are playing in. This game goes back and forth between serious and not serious, violent, like, say, certain death scenes, and borderline slapstick that it almost just doesn't know what it wants to be. This is most prevalent in the character motivations, and especially Amanda Waller's character, who is just god-awful and makes absolutely no sense in particular. I mean, she literally has no power here in this scenario. Sure, she can use the bombs to kill the Suicide Squad, but then she has no one. She wields this fake power over them like it's something which, in fairness, comes from a shoddy story. That makes no sense and has no believability. This story shouldn't exist because this story makes no sense and seems like basically that they had one draft off of a vague concept where they killed the Justice League and went into that one draft instead of something that was much more, plausible. Even the Suicide Squad movies made far more sense as stories because they weren't trying to kill the superhero equivalent of gods. Sure, they referenced it, but it's not like Amanda Waller literally had Harley Quinn trying to beat up Superman with a baseball bat. Because ultimately, that's not the purpose of the Suicide Squad and was never supposed to be the purpose. This game would have been far better had they done just like some special ops kind of missions that the military can take, or the military can't take on, but they could take with their skill sets that made the game a lot smaller. You could still make it online even, where people could team up on a whole slew of missions, maybe even steal some files or some documents from the Justice League and find out some evidence, like they may have an off-book space station with the power to blow up cities, for instance, like in the Justice League animated series, which literally has an episode dedicated to the Suicide Squad infiltrating the Justice League watchtower to steal information and disable parts of it, on their ship. That's how it should be. Or even a potentially cooler idea would be if they wish to go down this route where the Justice League are taken over and Brainiac invades, maybe still have this actually be a Batman game. Where you can play as Batman. He begrudgingly teams up with the Suicide Squad to achieve missions where Batman has to implement his failsafes for the Justice League while trying to stop Brainiac. It would be a far better game, for instance, because of two reasons. One, because Batman in this universe, and most media has really just been portrayed as a capable and forward-thinking individual who has contingencies for everything and would be right in line with his character, always being on his toes and generally distrusting of people. And two, the Suicide Squad can be now a more believable group of people with Batman by their side to stop the Justice League with an actual plan instead of what we got, which I will get to very, very soon with this story. But we didn't get those games, and instead we got a game with money, and financials were in the forefront, choosing to create this story with this game structure where it is an online play with missions and certain structures suited for that, grinding, looting, repetitive enemies, etc., at the cost of what I believe is a feasible narrative. Because of these story decisions, the Suicide Squad and most characters seemingly and genuinely act at random, with motivations that are at best inconsistent or not present at all, and certainly not reinforced to where we can empathize and actually give any care to these characters. Honestly, like, is Deadshot really trying to get back to his daughter? Because most of his choices and decisions don't really reinforce this, and he is the most sane character probably in this entire game. Ironically, Captain Boomerang is, if anything, the most consistent character in terms of his wants and needs, and he's just a bad character who is completely unlikable and annoying. Although in fairness, that seems like it was clearly intentional, and again, in fairness, it could work if there were other characters to balance it out, but there isn't. I feel like the people who wrote this game think that this is what people like, that this is what like 16-year-old boys think is funny, and ultimately it's not. It's not entertaining. And I don't think a lot of people, young people especially, think this type of humor, that these types of characters are actually people to empathize or like or believe. Honestly, everyone is just unlikable in this game, and they're just poorly written, or they make no sense, and they just try and crack jokes left and right that never land, or say something very mean-spirited out of nowhere, usually at the expense of men, I might want to point out. I like the Toy Man though. He's the only genuine character that makes any sense, and he's just a guy who gives you upgrades. The game really starts at this point. Once you go through all these missions and all these just different little sections, where you really have free reign to explore the city, to do main story missions and side missions where you can increase that sweet XP with better loot and guns and blah 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 blah. Usually they're the same copy and paste missions, which is really just lazy, and really the only fundamental difference being these little combat nullifiers or challenges where you have to play a certain way or use certain weapons to kill enemies, or they just give you certain restrictions just to make it different. Like a mission can be something like rescuing a group of survivors, for instance, where you can only kill enemies that have been frozen with your affliction and under a certain time limit, which, by the way, those missions allow you to shrink the people you're rescuing to bring them back to your rescue bus, which leads me to also point out another reason why this game is frustrating is that this game is set in the Arkham universe, where to a certain degree there was a level of grounded reality to the games that we had played before this, and in this one you're just introducing shrinking tech, aliens, and multiverses, and just all in this one game with no hint or really any explanation for a lot of these new rules in place. It's just jarring for players like myself, although I will admit that's just nitpicky personally for me. Eventually, your main story missions, which I'm largely going to be talking about, revolve around again one of two things. First, killing the Justice League, and second, finding various ways to kill the Justice League. Most of these missions are completely implausible, and implausible in the sense where you find the MacGuffin, which is either random or is aided by Lex Luthor from another dimension, but more on that later, that will stop the Justice League member, which they don't have any creative way to really stop any Justice League member. Now, generally the first, Justice League member you stop is the Flash, who at this point in the story was recaptured by Batman and brought back to the ship to be brainwashed again. In order to do this, we must find Lex Luthor, who's in this game and has information that pertains to the invasion, as he was one of the few people prepared for this invasion with no real reason of note, other than that he was communicating with someone who knows more than meets the eye. Dun dun dun. Once you find Lex, he has this weird anti-speed force device that disrupts the Flash's powers, only for him to show up and really just brutally killing him. He holds Lex Luthor's heart in his hand, but before the Flash can finish the Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman comes in and uses her lasso to see if there is a way to save the Justice League members, to which Flash gives a genuinely poignant moment of honesty and sincerity, where he tells her there's basically no saving them and that she would have to kill them before escaping. After, again, with Wonder Woman helping them conveniently escaping death, they find this MacGuffin anti-speed force tech and use it to fight the Flash, and after broadcasting it so that they goad him into fighting, battling the Flash is as expected. He's fast, and he's difficult to hit unless you use the Speed Force tech, which was really finicky to use, but eventually he goes down after a while, where Captain Boomerang attempts to pee on him. Classic comedy, guys.
And so the Flash has expired. He saved our lives, yet we ended his. As honorable warriors, we will show proper respect to this fallen hero by...
Show a little class, man. Holy shit. Congratulations.
Green Lantern shows up, and ultimately this encounter sends the crew to another Earth, where the Justice League have won and is inhabited by another Lex Luthor who survived and was giving their universe's Lex information to survive the Brainiac invasion. Now, one can make the argument that they have these devices and beat the Justice League with the help of Lex Luthor, and in particular with Green Lantern's weakness being stuck at Wayne Enterprises in their world. Sure, they can do all these things, it's not all MacGuffins, whatever. That's an okay argument, and it makes some sense as Lex Luthor has a lot of time to think about how to defeat the Justice League. But if I'm gonna be honest, I have 3 problems with this. First, it was made apparent that they know this Lex Luthor was assisting the original with the plans to stop the Justice League. The Flash hints at this and kills Lex to stop it. Second, the fact that he survived in this universe seemingly with the same personalities and egotistical, individual that he is, that this Lex shouldn't even be here without a real good reason. And finally, which is my biggest gripe with this whole story, is that it is abundantly just lazy storytelling and not very well thought out. Regardless if it's even explained, it's just not explained in a way that is organic. There is no discovering of these different weaknesses that we have to figure out or are well explained overall as to why these superheroes or weaknesses can actually affect these superheroes. Honestly, like Superman's is the stupidest. Regardless of Yellow Kryptonite is canon or not, there is no explaining any of this in any detail that would be satisfying or make sense. Like, honestly, there was a mission where they figure out the weakness of the Green Lantern power and make John Stewart doubt himself and weaken him, even just giving them that option to kill or save them. The lack of creativity of it all is really the worst aspect of this entire game. Anyways, we return to our Earth where we find the Yellow Lantern weaknesses, where Wonder Woman's making a green kryptonite shield to take on Superman, who, by the way, at this point of the story, hasn't even shown up yet. After we get the Yellow Lantern tech, we can challenge Green Lantern and his gunships, and basically just corrupt them, which weakens him. And once we defeated him, one of the weirdest and uncanon things just happens.
Way to maximize that potential, Sharky!
Shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. King Shark's lights.
What the hell? Regardless of it looking cool, regardless of it being bizarre, it makes no objective sense. The Green Lantern ring only goes to those that it chooses, or ones that are worthy. Once Jon Stewart dies, it immediately should have gone to the next ring bearer, the next chosen wearer of it. Not someone or anybody that can pick it up and immediately use it for, in this particular case, a literal shark attack. It is lazy and not faithful, and say what you will, but they've largely stuck to established comic book lore to a certain extent until now. But to do that is just overlooking something that is a core tenet of the character's legacy. I mean, honestly, imagine if Batman just started killing people with guns, or, again, Deadpool was a normal comic book character, never spoke in the third person or broke the fourth wall. The same goes to this, where it is clear that this should not have happened, and things like this are reasons to just dislike this story, as it was just, for some cool, I'll put it this way, for some people it's just a cool story moment, and people can post on Twitter or X and say that with, zero understanding of that this really should never have happened. Well, once the shark attack happens, weakening Brainiac's defenses, Amanda Waller, seeing an opportunity, uses a nuke on the ship, which the squad, doesn't like, by the way. Who would? Only for the nuke to be stopped by Superman, who flies up above Metropolis before letting it explode. After this, Superman and Wonder Woman begin fighting as she hopes to break Superman from his mind, still seeing a little bit of humanity left in him. We then have to pick up and rescue Amanda Waller, who at this point really just has gone off the rails. She's lost all composure and pretty much any meaningful leverage as we do an escort mission to get her back to the Hall of Justice. I do want to talk about her real quick as a character, Amanda Waller, as her character has just criminally been reduced to a crying and annoying semi-antagonistic individual with no real authority. Honestly, it seems like just for the purposes of comedy, seeing her usually calculating and strong and really just a strong-willed character reduced to having tantrums when things don't go her way. I mean, I'll be fair, most characters are treated in this exact manner. The heroes are the obvious ones, although excused because they're brainwashed and evil. But even characters like Amanda Waller are so poorly done and unconvincingly in this manner that it begs the question of why even characterize her in this manner? Even in mediums where she just loses all her power and control, she rarely lost her composure, and usually in terms of her adversarial view of the Justice League and the power that they have, she always stood tall and strong against them, making a great combative relationship, at least in the sense of both her espionage and political senses. Here, this is not the character she should be, going all the way back to my point that these characters are not the actual people they are portraying. This could just be a take, my own perspective and fairness, and just their interpretation of everything, which is fine. It's their interpretation. But honestly, it's really picking and choosing which characters they are relatively faithful and which ones they aren't, because this version of Wonder Woman seems pretty spot on to me with some caveats. Of all the people to make, look like caricature versions of themselves, I mean, is the black woman, for those who see this game as, more of the DEI content mold. I mean, it's a very bold move, but again, that's just me speculating. Once we rescue Waller and bring her back to the Hall of Justice, Superman and Wonder Woman bring their fight to the Hall of Justice, where Superman is damaged by the kryptonite, but not killed. Green kryptonite, mind you. Superman blasts Wonder Woman with his laser vision, killing her probably, really, honestly, the only death that was done with any real honor, which continues to add to my point about picking and choosing favoring certain characters. Now, with Superman briefly out of commission, they devise his plan to capture Batman and get the key to destroying Superman, although they have an idea how to kill Superman, with Lex Luthor from another world developing this golden kryptonite. Again, green kryptonite clearly has an effect, but whatever.
You went out like you lived, doll. Looking sharp. And never listening to us.
What the hell do we do now?
Task Force X! Get inside.
So, the part that I was most interested in that has so far kept me going was confronting Batman and what his mission ultimately was going to be. Now keep in mind, story-wise, we are largely about 3/4 of the way into this game and story, where it has just been a boring and annoying game to largely get through. The bosses have been repetitive, the character's offensive in the sense of the characterizations, and the overall game it's just not fun. It's not fun, it is engaging at this point, but the Batman. I want to see what they were going to do with the guy that started it all. How are they going to end the Batman? Now, full disclosure, I knew beforehand how they were going to end Batman's character, which I personally did not like that this happened. Considering this was Kevin Conroy's last chance to voice the character, at least for the Arkham series. I believe he has one more voice appearance as Batman as an animated movie, as his last role. I wanted to know the process of how it got to that point. And let me explain and just say, at least to me, it was truthfully one of the single worst ways you could possibly disrespect and just, oh my god, I'm getting all just worked up because of it. It's truly one of the worst ways to disrespectfully end a character that started everything for the company, almost to a point where I literally stopped playing. So it starts with the squad finding Batman's new Batcave under Metropolis, which is cool, big, vast, and really would have been a great base of operations had they done, let's say another Batman game in Metropolis. We then stumble upon a Bat computer where a hologram Bruce Wayne gives thanks to those he loves, Robin, Nightwing, and the Oracle, and then begins explaining the process of how to defeat the Justice League if they go rogue, which again is frustrating that all the people to be under my control by Brainiac is Batman, who has contingencies for how to defeat the Justice League. Literally everyone. But wouldn't be cautious of potential extraterrestrial threats coming beyond from afar is just stupid. It's beyond me. Also, a Robin mask appears on the ground, which really hints that Batman may have killed Robin, who was trying to stop him, which I don't really... It's a really dark turn, from what happened to Arkham Knight for Tim Drake, if that's the case. The lights go off and Batman has released some of the Scarecrow fear toxin in the cave, where the squad have to vent the toxin out of the cave while Batman messes with them, isolates them, takes them out one by one. As the toxin takes hold, they all start to lose their minds and themselves trying to save one another, which also is strange because, the development of the team's chemistry is very rushed and really, really forced at this point. Everyone largely succumbs to the fear toxin, where a nightmarish version of Batman wins until he doesn't, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but eventually you enter a boss battle with Nightmare Batman, the Nightmare Batman is a great design, I'll admit that, in a basic and very frustrating battle for me, which admittedly I'm not very good at this game, but I still beat it. Also, beating, Batman's fear toxin because they're already crazy, because Harley Quinn knows neurochemistry, that's just a terrible reason to me. It's not supposed to invoke insanity, but it's supposed to invoke fear and reach your darkest state, the fear toxin, And really only the people of the strongest wills become the ones capable of overcoming it, which I just didn't agree with in, the Arkham games. Okay, I'll put it this way. I didn't agree with Arkham Knight that Batman can just overcome the fear toxin just because, he's just super powerful and just power of will, iron will, all that stuff, But at the same time, that is already established in this series, though. That's already a point. I don't know why they're trying to change it. Having them overcome it really is just a really purely lazy way to me and lacks any real creativity. Come up with something at least instead of, I'm crazy so it doesn't work on us, is just stupid. Possibly develop something beforehand, like the other Justice League members to counteract the effects of the toxin. it's really just something simple. Set it up early and then pay off later, and I'd gripe a lot less and complain a lot less. After capturing Batman, we bring him to Lex Luthor, who is planning to run experiments on Batman, which he injects him with a needle before he can finish his famous "I'm Batman" phrase, which again is just the little things like that that make me pause and just give zero respect for this game when they choose actions like this. Anyways, we come back later with yellow kryptonite in hand, where we decide to use Batman as bait to get Superman out open in the wild. What follows is something that really just it struck such a nerve with me. We go on a drive with Batman in tow, where we effectively bring him to his death. Now, honestly, this part's a lot shorter than it actually felt, but knowing what happens, it really upsets me seeing one of my favorite superheroes brought out like this, just leading up to his eventual death. Once they arrive at the location, Batman, resilient as always, refuses to give an inch, while Harley gives the most annoying speech, which Batman says what most of us are thinking before he is just straight up murdered like some nobody.
You think you're a team now? You're herd animals, dependent on someone else to survive. Like you, Harkness. An illiterate alcoholic who's desperate for the spotlight.
Yeah, and Floyd's a deadbeat dad. Sharky's a freak who'll never be a real boy, and what was it? Oh yeah, I never was too bright. Get some new material, jerk off. You know, Joker used to be real good at hurting people with words. But you, boop. Even when you're evil, you're still too good. You had a good run, Brucey. Flying around Gotham, punching bad guys, cleaning up the streets, causing long-term mental and emotional damage to everyone you knew. It's our turn now. After all we've been through. Oh. Bet you didn't think it'd be me at the end, huh, Babs?
Are we done with your bad stand-up routine?
Almost. But you always gotta end on your best joke. Time for us bad guys to save the world.
Now, if anyone defends that ending for Batman, specifically that ending for Batman being a good idea, if you thought this was a cool ending, that's whatever. But if you thought that was a good idea, regardless of Kevin Conroy's passing, you're just an absolute fool. Which leads me to believe and ask myself, why would anyone write this type and kind of story? That to me makes the least amount of sense at all. It is one thing to write subversive stories or just mess with people's expectations, but to write something in general that will immediately alienate a part of your audience, either for shock value or just because you wanted to just kill the Batman character off, is unapologetically moronic and stupid. It is a truly brain-dead idea from people who either do not understand the fan base and, or I think, care about the fan base and wish to just kill off the Batman character in order to promote other characters like, say, Harley Quinn to the forefront. If that is their thought process, then it is a truly brain-dead thought process. I mean, you want to see your sales go down because of this one choice? Go ahead, do it. I know people who refuse to play this game just because of that alone, because it is nonsense, it is disrespectful, and it's just stupid. Regardless if it was okayed by Kevin Conroy himself before he passed, it is not the way to end a character's legacy without it at the bare minimum being mean-spirited in the way that it was done. Anyways, we fight Superman in a boss fight that is interesting but generally lackluster, and again, unfreaking believable because, I mean, it's freaking Superman. You know, once we kill him again in a very unceremonious way, we celebrate. Having killed the Justice League, yay! In probably the single stupidest and most improbable way possible, which again, it just makes no sense and is completely unbelievable. Whatever. They then are captured by Brainiac, frozen and taken aboard his ship, where Brainiac has a chance to just kill them, but doesn't, and for some reason offers them a chance to, you know, if they help him before being rescued by Lex Luthor. By the way, this is a little offbeat, but Brainiac's design bothers me. I don't mind the alien version because there are incarnations of some alien robot hybrid, but I always pictured more of an actual, you know, cyborg robot rather than the alien with augmentations. It's more of a nitpick than anything else, and you know, this is clearly a very different Brainiac than, say, a comic book Brainiac, but whatever. Regardless, Lex and Amanda Waller find out about each other, and they decide to team up and stop Brainiac once and for all to save the world. The crew then find out that there are actually multiple Brainiacs, not just one, but actually 13 different ones that are all trying to take down the multiverse. They go and fight Brainiac, who is difficult, and honestly, that was where I reached my final breaking point of not really completing this game. A first so far from my channel, as I just refuse to play it since I've been riding this thing on and off basically since I've last played it. I think as of the recording of this is about 3 or 4 months of me just trying to compile my thoughts together in a very sloppy way. Now the ending I do know and briefly will explain, where Brainiac is captured in a tiny prison where once brought back to the original Earth, then has information extracted from him, which ultimately kills him, but he doesn't end the game, technically. I mean, it is an online game where there are 12 more Brainiacs to fight that will be released in subsequent months. If this game even lasts that long, if I'm gonna be honest. Seemingly it will not at this rate though. I believe at the recording of this, they have released that, you know, the next Brainiac, the Joker DLC, and the second Brainiac you have to fight, which is ultimately upsetting for many reasons. One, weird Joker, but that can be forgiven. But in reality, there just isn't a lot of content, at least in this season pass, that is even remotely justifiable for the price you're paying to play this boring garbage game. Which I think is the biggest thing that's upsetting a lot of people with this DLC. I think I've been going on for a while, and I think I should end on this as a conclusion to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This is a game that really opened my eyes to how bad video games can be, even from a quality developer like Rocksteady. That the influence of DEI, let's say, has put a real stranglehold on video games and franchises that push forward these ideals in pursuit of something they will never achieve. Which to me, I think, is a very progressive-minded game, an ideal that is written by progressive people, and that people will want to actually play and buy. That is something that will never happen, or at least never happen unless influenced by lying to the consumer base, in which case, you still lose your consumer, especially for future games. I mean, if anyone is looking at currently Assassin's Creed Shadows, that was honestly a game that I was probably going to be the first Assassin's Creed game that I bought since Syndicate, because I wanted a game to be set in Japan. Now I'm just never going to play that game. Especially since I'm a Japanese American myself. That's really offensive to me. But regardless, this game is just more than that. More than the mean-spirited and business bankrupting decisions that they chose in this game. It is people in charge of the entire process who have literally no idea what they're writing about or really what they're even doing. The only thing in their defense is that they've had a lot of writers work on this game, which range from, I'd probably say 18 to 26 different writers putting their take on things, while Arkham Asylum, for instance, was written by 2 people, one of them literally being Paul Dini, whose work on the Batman animated series to this day is considered some of the greatest comic book fiction ever made. I mean, that literally reinvented and retconned Mr. Freeze's backstory and literally created Harley Quinn as a character. I mean, these are people who are honestly just terrible and unqualified at their job at making, and in particular, writing these games. And this game, and specifically, do not deserve to work in the industry if they plan to produce trash like this. This was a bad premise that only progressively got worse and worse as the game and story itself evolved to try and make up for the inexplicable and stupid premise, only to end the game in such a way that I will never play a new game by Rocksteady unless things drastically change, which ultimately may never be. This game, if only for a moment, made me cynical at the state of video games and did the opposite of what video games are supposed to do. Instead of just escapism and broadening the imagination, it just made me annoyed and disengaged to a point where I stopped playing the game roughly 10 hours in, although I wanted to stop after 4. If you love this game, have fun with this game, and in general just enjoy it then, by all means. I won't stop you, and you should enjoy it if it does bring you some joy and happiness, but I won't. I won't play this game again, a promise I intend to keep. Do not play or buy this game. Certainly for the price they sell it at, it is not worth your time. Thank you guys for listening, like and subscribe, and you all rock.
Be careful! I'll need a clear brain scan to set the baseline before the more invasive procedures. Now, let's begin. That'll be all.
You've already lost, Luther. I am vengeance. I am...
Hey!
Ah!